Alright, let's armor up. Besides you. Oh. Wait. Wait. Oh. Oh. I didn't realize. Oh my goodness. Welcome to Tales of Rise, where slavery is bad and everybody's racist. For some reason, I find myself spending $60 every time Bandai Namco drops a game, so after Scarlet Nexus, here I am reviewing another one of their potential masterpieces. I'm not going to speak much on the story for this video, leaving room for a second video for the entirety of that and the post-game, but let's set the scene. That's Rena, and that's Dana. One planet is full of regular old folk, and the other one's full of regular old folk, but with better technology. You know what that means. But look at this dude. That's Iron Mask. I can't tell you his real name or what he looks like because that's just stick. A mystery. No face, no memories. And somehow he lacks the ability to feel pain. His immaculate lack of drip and healthy abusive environment reveals that he's a Danan, a member of the people enslaved to the almighty Renan people. Good old Iron Abs Iron Mask meets Shion, a Renan girl who bears the curse of thorns, hurting anyone who makes physical contact. Now you have a man that feels no pain and a woman that is nothing but pain. Add on the fact that he can pull a sword from her chest that would be absolutely impossible to hold if you could feel pain, but guess how much of an absolute unit Iron Mask is? They're pretty much a match made in heaven. In short, their mission is to kill the Renan lords that each rule over one of the 5 regions in order to stop the crown contest, which is essentially a dick measuring contest between the lords to see who can collect the most astral energy and become the next big dog. After 300 years of slavery, that sounds like an impossible task, but they're going to be accomplishing this in a stylish fashion, combat-wise. Compared to Tales games of the past, Arise takes a similar approach in foundation, but radically different in execution. Enemy encounters take place on a separate battlefield from the open world with a quick transition in and out. Previous entries had weird movement in combat, only being able to move forward and backward unless you hold a button for free movement. In Arise, your movement is entirely free, and against a lot of enemies, you'll need all the movement options you have. Outside of that, if you play the Tales game, you should feel rather at home with the flow of combat once you get a feel for the new controls. The amount of actions you can do in a combo is restricted by your AG and the normal attack limit, but both can be upgraded later on. One of the bigger changes is the lack of individual character mana, instead being replaced with a CP gauge. Arts are free to cast within your AG limit, but healing or buffing consumes both AG and CP. AG will refill over the span of a few seconds, so that's no biggie, but CP is only restored through certain items or resting, making healing and buffing have limits based on how desperate you are for them. I will say that I never really ran out of CP in normal encounters, and before boss fights they do give you a full refill of character HP and CP, so running out isn't that big of an issue in the short term, but in longer boss fights you definitely can and will run out. I initially hated it, but after a while I came to respect it. As with other Tales games, you still have up to 4 party members out at once, and combat's going to revolve around taking advantage of enemy weaknesses so you can down them and deal out as much damage as you can and then carrying that momentum to the next enemy. These weaknesses can be exploited via elemental attacks or special boost attacks performed by each character in the party, which is a good way to segue into the actual characters. Alphen is the big boy swordsman and leader of the party. By using the flaming sword, he can sacrifice his HP in order to supercharge certain attacks for actual metric and imperial tons of damage. His boost attack has the most broad use, working on nearly any enemy, while still costing a bit of HP as a compromise for its versatility. Shion casts gun and shoots magic, serving as the most versatile healer in the party. She also has access to bombs which she can throw and then shoot afterwards to alter the effects of the explosion. Her boost attack is a blast that works best against flying enemies, grounding them for the rest of the party to wail on them. The boost attack's visual range is actually the functional range, so you can line it up to hit multiple enemies and reap the benefits. Rinwell is the mage that can only cast Hoodle and Racism. I'm actually a huge fan of her gimmick. She can cast her arts and choose to reserve them when fully charged. These arts can then be used quickly after a separate art, or you can choose to cast the same art again to combine the two into another, stronger art, which can include arts that will unlock later in the game, or even only be accessible through this interaction. Her boost attack relates to this. By using her boost attack against an enemy that's charging an art, she can seal their casting and take the art that they were charging. This serves as a way to skip the cast time and just instantly reserve an art. Law's just someone from the FGC who managed to get trapped in the game. The resident fisticuffs boy, he thrives off of uninterrupted combat, allowing him to tap into his awakening mode for more damage. If you manage to keep him unharmed in the hectic scenes of combat, he'll single-handedly shred health bars. The attack boost that he gets from awakening is pretty noteworthy and should be abused when it can. His boost attack is just a big middle finger to enemies with shields, shells, and other protective measures. Kisara is hot. Big Shield Mommy is the defensive character, but she's not as defensive as you think. Unlike everybody else, she has a block instead of a dodge, meaning she could take more hits up front for less damage or no damage if you time the block right. You'd want to practice this as her arts deal much more damage after a perfect block. And in theme with being an immovable object, her boost attack slams her shield on the ground, stopping any enemies that are currently or prepping to do charge attacks. Dohalim, aka Papa Dolan, is a dark-skinned king of which I stan, but I cannot comprehend the fact that he doesn't know how to tie his own shoes. If you think you've nailed the art of perfect evasions, then Dohalim is the guy for you. Perfect evasion leads to him extending his rod and increasing his penetration in order to land more critical strikes, and leads to more stagger on enemies for every thrust of his rod. And to top it off, his boost attack eliminates the ability for speedy enemies to dodge attacks, meaning they're gonna take every whack from his rod. Sorry about that, I don't know what came over, Jesus Christ. Oh, okay, well, titles, yeah. For every character, their arts and passives are attained from titles, which are all presented on the skill board. Each title has 5 nodes, and getting all the nodes in a cluster grants a small stat boost. These nodes are unlocked using CP, which is obtained from combat and side quests. I've loved the combat thus far. Each character feels unique, and their individual gimmicks maintain high levels of interaction. Even if an enemy doesn't have the matching weakness for a given boost attack to abuse, the boost attacks still refill AG, meaning you can extend combos either way. And in nearly every single fight, you're going to have the chance to use a character's gimmick to its full potential. And even though the game doesn't force you to play as anybody specifically during any point, I've still gone through and rotated through the entire roster every time I've played. And just as much as I love every character, I've loved each environment that's been presented thus far. Each region stands on its own with some highlight locations, and it definitely has me excited to see what the second half of the game has to offer. The art style does no wrong at all. And while combat can get visually cluttered, it's sort of an appealing clutter in my opinion. Vibrancy is definitely the name of the game. The voice actors from the main cast nailed their roles, and someone needs to hook Kisara's VA up with a raise for all the screaming that she did during her introduction. And I don't think the side characters are bad either, honestly. The side quests are cool contextually, but in terms of what you actually do for the side quests, they're not very varied. But early and more importantly later on in the game, they're going to have much more importance to your progression, as there are some titles that are locked behind them, as well as large sums of CP for unlocking skills. So there's always a reason to take them on every once in a while. And speaking of side things, some of the side activities are actually pretty cool too. Fishing is a well-beloved minigame in a lot of games, and I'm happy it's included in Arise as well. I suck at it, but I'm going to have to get good at it because there's also titles locked behind that. There's a ranch system which allows you to raise some animals in the background, which you can then harvest for meat later for cooking. There's also the training ground, which has a couple of missions based on the individual characters as well as fighting as a whole party. And entering the second half of the game, I believe some optional dungeons have actually appeared throughout the world. The giant Zoogles are nice little DPS checks that reward you with astral flowers, which allow you to increase your CP limit by 10. And then there's the Tails staple, outfits and accessories. You don't have as much control over accessories, where they go, what size they are in this game. You could just pick an accessory and change the color, and you only have 2 slots. But as a trade-off, they did add weapon skins, so that means if you really like the design of a weapon, you can keep that design on the character. So now I'm running around with a group of farmers killing everything. And I do want to point out, even though this doesn't really boggle my mind too much, but some of the paid DLC outfits actually have titles locked behind those as well. Which means that there's potentially arts as well as just some additional passives that you can't get unless you cough up the money. And that's not to say that these outfits are super expensive or it's game breaking, but I just think it's a little weird to lock some actual in-game abilities behind getting a ninja outfit. And it doesn't really matter because I'm probably going to get these anyway because these outfits all look amazing. Which also brings up another topic. The game is still very young, so there isn't a whole lot, but the game was made in Unreal Engine 4, meaning that there is potential for mods to come around. A quick Google search shows that there are a few mods, but most of them are just little changes to the UI or color swaps. So maybe at some point we could get some really cool looking costume mods in addition to the costumes that we already have with the game. All in all, in the nearly 40 hours that I've spent playing the game so far, I've enjoyed nearly every second. I have a little experience playing Tales games prior to this, having played a few but never beating them because the combat didn't really do much for me. Which kinda sucks, but I want to give those games another shot after I finish Arise because Tales games have always had interesting worlds. And Arise is no different from a world building standpoint, it's still a very amazing world. But Arise does make up in gameplay what the other games have lacked for me, and I'm only halfway through the game. Tales games like to split the story up in two and have some sort of dramatic shift in the middle, and I've gotten to that point and now I'm even more hooked onto the story than I was before. And they're also not strangers to having a lot of post-game content, so maybe a second Tales of Arise video might be on the bingo card. But I can say with confidence that I do recommend Tales of Arise. Gorgeous visuals, interesting story, and a very engaging combat system. Doesn't really get much better than that, right? Either way, Tales of Arise, love it, can't wait to finish it. Go play it, I'ma go play it. Like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, comment if you want to talk smack, and subscribe if you want to inflate my ego. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.